Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and depending on where you find yourself, it's either morning or afternoon or evening. I am joining you from Atlantic Canada. My name is Buhle Dlamini from Tomorrow Today Global, and I'm joining you today on this discussion around diversity. Graeme Codrington has just joined the room. We apologize for a slight delay. But we're here and we're ready to go. Welcome, Graeme, and hopefully everything is worked out for you this morning. Well, not morning for you, afternoon, morning for me.
Hey there, Buhle. Can you hear me? That's the first thing.
Yes, I can hear you, and we are live.
I know we're live, and now you're in my green screen studio without all the beautiful backgrounds and with me a little bit frantic. But that's, I suppose, the point of this webinar. I could pretend that I planned all of this just to make a point, right? The point about disruption, the point about having plan B, C, D, and everything else, and being able to respond in a crisis. I wish I'd planned it. I'm a little bit more frazzled than normal. But how are you? How are you today?
I'm good. Go ahead, Graeme. Let me welcome people in. Welcome everybody that's joining us already. And as you come in, please feel free to write down where you're joining us from. We would love to know where you're joining us from today. And yes, Graeme has had a little bit of a challenge this morning. I didn't share about that yet, Graeme. As he was about to go on, his computer sort of like gave him some issues, as it happens with most of us these days. That's a reality that we are dealing with in the world that we're living in today. That is just part of this world. Actually, Graeme, yesterday I was in the middle of the session and it was going very, very well. And I was just busy making a point. It was in that point in the presentation where everybody, hey, sunny Cape Town. I was actually talking to the group, to the leadership of the city of Cape Town yesterday. And then just as I was in the middle of my presentation, everything cut off from my side. And there's over 100 people on the conference session. And thankfully we're able to get back in. But I guess that's a reality of where we find ourselves these days.
Exactly. And that's why I've been running this series called Workplace Culture 2021. And Buhle, thank you so much for joining me. This is the last webinar I'm doing here in 2020. And let me just set the scene and then we can dive into the conversation. As I've been speaking to my clients over the last few weeks and months, probably in this last quarter of the year especially, as people are thinking ahead to what's going to happen next year, more and more people have been asking me, how do we prepare our team? How do we engage with our colleagues, with our employees, in helping them to set themselves up for continued disruption? We know that now, so we don't need any more conferences or sessions that are telling us disruption is coming. That much is clear. That much is clear, even in my morning today. And the question then is, well, how do we help our teams to be the best that they can be in 2021? A lot of people have felt, 2020 was obviously tough for many of us, the roughest year we've experienced, tough year. We've made it through the year. We've sort of pushed through. And I think there's a feeling like we can't have another year like that. And if disruption is still going to be in the system, if COVID isn't disappearing anytime soon, and then even forget COVID, if all the other disruptions, digital transformation, climate change, geopolitics, if all of that stuff is still in the system, what do we need to do? So that's what this webinar series is about. If you haven't seen the previous discussions I've had, go to my website, and that is grahamecodrington.com/webinars, and you can see the full history. They're all available, all for free, and I think every one of them is worth watching. But today's topic is with my colleague and friend, Buhle Dlamini, who is really a world expert on organizational culture. And a particular aspect of organizational culture that I wanted to chat about today, and that is the issue of diversity and inclusion. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we often go to one of two spaces, just race and culture or gender. But of course, diversity includes so many different aspects. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the key thing that I wanted to talk about is that I believe, and this is, Buhle, why I've kept you to last. Don't tell anybody else, but I think I've kept the best till last. Okay, between you and me. But I honestly think this topic is one of the most important topics. I think so many people do it badly because they see it as a sort of compliance-led, we've just got to tick up our diversity boxes. But I think that if you really build a mindset of engaging with difference, of getting the most out of the differences in your team, you unlock innovation, you unlock resilience, you unlock adaptability. And those three words in particular, innovation, resilience, and adaptability, are at the heart of any strategy you need for next year. So I probably could have just come on and said all of that stuff, finished the video, and then my job is done. But Buhle, you're the expert in this. First of all, can I just throw that out to you as a question? What do you think about what I've just said there? That do you see what I see in terms of this issue of diversity, inclusion, difference being absolutely essential?
I think, Graeme, it is important to acknowledge that when we come into this topic, it is definitely one that is so crucial for organizational culture more than ever today. The reason for that is that we are now living in a world that is more diverse than ever before. I'm not saying that we didn't have difference in our world before. We are living in a world where diversity and difference is expected and should be expected. Because we are living in a global village, we're living in a world where people come from all over different parts of the world and are working in the same companies. Companies themselves have become very, very global and very diverse in the way that they approach their work. And so if you are in part of any organization, this is a topic that you can't escape. But here's another thing that's quite important as we delve into this. As we think about organizational culture, I think it is important that we also mention that when it comes to this topic, over the years, the topic has become fraught with negativity. And so for most people, when they hear the word diversity and inclusion, they roll their eyes, they check out, they look for the next exit, and they think, oh my goodness, I need this like I need a hole in my forehead. And so that's the reality of what we're dealing with when we're dealing with this topic, is that there is so much fatigue around it. And so before we can delve into why we need it and why it's so important, we really have to address these two things right up front. We have to address this diversity fatigue. We have to address this negativity attached with this topic. And so I'll tell you what's driving this, Graeme. When you think about this topic, what's driving the diversity fatigue is basically that it's been, in many cases, used for punitive measures. And so what tends to happen is that the topic of diversity comes up when someone has done something wrong. You know, someone said something offensive in the office, someone made an ad that made everybody mad, or something has happened that caused people to say, you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have said that, that shouldn't have happened. And as a result, in comes in diversity experts to come and talk to us about how to be sensitive as we delve into the issue of difference and diversity. And so it's seen as a punitive measure. It's seen as something like a stick that gets pulled out when we're in trouble. And so this is
can I add to that, Buhle? And I think this is something maybe I can say that you might not be able to. And what I mean by that is I think that white people and maybe white men and maybe middle-aged white men should say this a little bit more. I think we, middle-aged white men, are scared of this topic as well because of that. We're scared that we might say something. We're scared we don't fully understand all of the sensitivity. So anytime somebody says, there's a diversity workshop, we think, I've done something wrong, and they wanting to now come and beat me with a stick again. Or even worse, I haven't done anything wrong, I just am wrong. I'm the wrong skin color, I'm the wrong gender, I'm the wrong age. There's nothing I can do about it, but I'm still wrong. And I think you're absolutely right. That's where that negativity, and even more than negativity, that nervousness and even fear and anxiety comes from. And I guess that is the case in some companies, but we need to get beyond that, right?
Exactly. So having said all of that, and we've got to move out of the way. And so our approach and my understanding when it comes to organizational culture is that when we think about this topic, we really need to move away from that mindset. We really need to move to what you were actually just talking about now. We believe that difference, or embracing difference, is really key to success in the future. Not only for your people, but actually for those things that we've just mentioned, for innovation, for effectiveness, and so on. We often ask this question: who do you think is the most is the most effective team? Diverse teams or the homogeneous ones? Who do you think is the most diverse teams? Is the most effective team? Diverse teams or the homogeneous one? Actually, I'm going to ask you just on the chat box that just tell me who do you think of the two is the most effective. So if you have a diverse team or you have a homogeneous team, let's hear from the people on the call. We've got Linda from Stockholm, Sweden. We've got Lebogang in Ekurhuleni in Johannesburg. Well, actually, Ekurhuleni and Johannesburg are two different places. My apologies. So we've got Ingrid, we've got Vilna, we've got Steve, we've got Lucy. So who do you think is the most effective? Just let's see it. Lucy says diverse. Ingrid says diverse teams are more innovative and productive. Let's see if we can get more diverse teams. Vilna, and so
it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because you phrased the question specifically. You didn't ask which is the easiest team to lead. You didn't ask which is the most compliant team. You didn't ask which is the team that has the and let me put this in air quotes, the best relationships. By best, I probably mean the most comfortable.
But I tricked them as well, Graeme. I did trick them with that question because the answer is neither. The research actually found that homogeneous teams, as Steve just caught on to it, just as it depends about leadership and culture. Research just actually found, and research has been done on this, homogeneous teams actually are usually more effective than diverse teams because there's less to deal with. It's kind of things that you were talking about. If people think the same, if people sort of come from the same background, there's less issues to get into and to sort of like stand in the way. But something happens with homogeneous teams is that they don't become effective over time. They become effective and then they taper off. They're sort of like they can't go beyond a certain point. Whereas with diverse teams, what tends to happen is that diverse teams they start out okay, but then challenges comes because of the diversity and the difference, and then it plummets. The real answer here, Graeme, is that it's diverse teams that are inclusive that bring about all of these things that we're talking about. That bring about innovation, that bring about effectiveness, and that bring about a change in the culture that is positive. And so the answer is not in either having diversity or not having diversity. The answer is moving beyond diversity. Diversity should be a topic we shouldn't be talking about it anymore in the same way. And that's why we talk about leading difference, and we talk about inclusion, and we're talking about equity, because diversity simply means who is represented. And if we only attain diversity, we bring different people together. But if we attain inclusion and diversity, we bring different people together and we leverage that difference to actually achieve even greater things for organizations and our teams. And so that has been sort of like the engagement that we've been having with teams and with organizations to say, okay, so how do you get there? Because when you get there, no longer do you have victims and the oppressors, which is kind of like the methodology of engaging on this topic. There's a villain, and then there are the poor, poor diverse people that are so marginalized that we have to think about and we have to mollycoddle and all of that. It doesn't help anybody. That kind of mindset, that kind of engaging around this topic doesn't help those who are disenfranchised, and it doesn't help those who maybe benefit from the current reality. What we need to do is to say, how do we get the best out of the difference that we have in our organization? That means that white men and white people are not marginalized. That means that people of color and women and people from the LGBTQ community are not marginalized. Everybody brings their difference. This is a very different way of engaging around this topic that I really believe we need to be doing more and more.
Brilliant. Now, I'm going to say something now that I'm going to ask the editor of this video to cut out and then make sure they only see me in this part, because sure. It's the most clever thing I've ever heard. And the person who taught it to me was you. So I'm stealing this from you, but right in front of your face, I'm stealing it. And then the editor's going to make it sound like it was mine. Because for people who need to understand this, I'm joking, of course. This is a way that Buhle, you've taught me to speak about this. Diversity, if all we think about is diversity, in other words, we've got a compliance checklist where we're just making sure, maybe like Noah's Ark, you've got 2 of each type in the room. And that's all your mindset is. That's diversity. And it's the same as inviting people to the party.
Yes.
So you can send out all the invitations. You can invite the people to the party. You can look around the room and you can say, excellent, I've done well. There's a lot of diversity in this room. Inclusion, though, is giving people permission to dance. Not to dance your dance, not to dance the dance that the DJ is spinning, but to dance their dance. So now they're at the party, but are they standing on the outside watching the dance? And then what kind of party is that? Or are they actually being able to be themselves at the party? That opened my eyes when you gave me that picture. I hope it works for other people. And that's really what we need to be doing next year. Not just ticking diversity. Nobody's got time for diversity checklists in 2021.
No.
What we need is to unlock the power of difference and the power of inclusion, if you want to use more formal language. Let me pause there and see if you just want to add to that thought, Buhle.
Yes, and I'll take it a step further than Graeme. I think for the purposes of this engagement, I'll make a statement that should really direct the rest of our conversation. What does a successful organizational culture look like into the future? And this is what I'll have to say on this, is that a successful organization of the future is one where difference, not sameness, is expected, celebrated, and leveraged.
Yeah. 3
distinctive things. It's an organization where difference is expected, celebrated, and leveraged. And so each of these things comes with its own sort of like sections. Because if we are going to expect difference, then it means that as an organization, we create an environment in which difference is not blocked, or difference is not we don't have barriers to difference. Most organizations operate in this way. They say, we like difference around here, but these are the hoops that you're going to have to jump to actually be on the inside of this organization. And so if we expect diversity, it means that we change the way that we invite people into the organization. And so then we change how we recruit. It's been very, very interesting. There's a huge move when you think about how we have moved in this space. And so in the past, it was like people with names that maybe sounded more ethnic and so on. They wouldn't be invited to the interview. So we got rid of that. So we put different systems in place now. We have algorithms, and we have we have software that makes sure that nobody can be left out. But it's very, very interesting how even with our artificial intelligence, we still have bias even brought into the artificial intelligence that we use, because people are the ones that create these programs. And so when a difference is expected, the barriers are taken away. So those are the three things that, in terms of this conversation, expected, celebrated, and leveraged, and what each of those mean.
Nice. So, Buhle, we've got a few minutes left. We're trying to keep these webinars short and sharp, give you some practical takeaways. If you joined us live, the real bonus is you can ask us direct questions. So please use the chat box, throw your questions in. If you're watching the replay a little bit later, Buhle, this is going to be weird for you right now live, but here's Buhle's email address. Okay, I promise you I'll put it in there, Buhle, afterwards. And then people who watch the replay, buhle@tomorrowtodayglobal.com, and they can just contact you directly with their questions if they're watching the replay. If you're live, throw it into the chat box. Buhle, I can't see the chat box today, craziness. So hopefully you can keep an eye on it if any questions come in. But
Absolutely.
Before I throw it back to you with my question, which is, so what would be the 2 or 3 practical things that people could start at the beginning of 2021? So that's going to be my question. But before I throw that to you, let me just remind everybody again. I've mentioned 3 words: innovation, resilience, adaptability. That's what I think difference and inclusion brings. And let me quickly explain why. Innovation, the heart of innovation, is seeing something differently from the way everybody else has seen it before. So that's a definition of creativity, but it's also a definition of innovation. It's looking at what everybody else is looking at and seeing something else. Now, if you can't make the link to diversity, I'm not sure I can help you here, because if everybody on your team has got the same background, so you're a team of engineers and you're all civil engineers who all went to the same university and all went to the same university in the 1990s, and you all specialized in cement. I don't know, I'm making this stuff up. How on earth do you expect to get innovation out of that team? Sure, they can innovate, but they are all looking at the problem from the same perspective. Surely you want different perspectives. So, anyway, as I say, if I need to explain that, you've got problems. So I think innovation is easy to understand. Resilience. Think about this in your family, right? We've been in lockdown, versions of lockdown here in South Africa, where I'm based, for the last, I don't know how many, stopped counting days a while ago, 9 months, I think, 10 months now. And I've got a family, a household of how many are we in the house here? 6 people on our property. We've been locked down together, and early on we came up with one rule. We said we're going to survive lockdown if we all stick to this one rule. You're allowed to have a bad day, but we're not all allowed to have a bad day on the same day.
I love that.
Now, it was a stupid rule, because how can you tell when you're going to have a bad day? But it was kind of saying, if you wake up in the morning and you see somebody else in the family is having a really bad day, and all you're having is just a normal bad day, then you suck it up today, and you be the one who's having a good day today. Fake it till you make it if you have to. But the point is, if somebody else is really struggling right now, you might not be. And so you can put a little bit effort in, a little bit more effort today, because the other person is dealing with stuff you're not dealing with. That's diversity there. Diversity of life experiences, diversity of personalities. diversity of gender, diversity of age, diversity, lots of different diversities. That meant that some people had a bad day on some days, other people had a bad day on another day. And actually, we've been through the whole of lockdown where we've never all had a bad day on the same day. And that brought resilience to our household. That brought a sense of we can do this, because the person who was having a good day was able to have enough of a good day for everybody. Again, I hope I don't have to make the link back to your team, to your office. And the third one is adaptability. And that's at the heart of what we need to do to respond. Adaptability is your ability to flex and change. And in essence, it's innovation and resilience combined together on a day-to-day basis to just saying, we can flex, we can move, we can shift. The more different perspectives, the more different people you've got in the system, the easier it is to be adaptive. So if any of those three or all of those three things, innovation, resilience, and adaptability, are necessary in your environment, then diversity is going to be a secret weapon for you. Difference,
Absolutely.
Inclusion. So with all of that said, Buhle, what do you think people can do? What tips and tricks can you give people as they head into 2021 on how to get more out of the difference they probably got in their teams?
I think that first and foremost is that we need to change the way that we think about this topic. And so what you need to do as you go back into your workplace is to remember that diversity is just about embracing. When we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity, we're talking about embracing our differences. And so that means that that's all of us. That doesn't mean that, that's all of us. So all of us bring in the diversity, regardless of who we are, regardless of our background. But then these three things that I mentioned in my statement then become important. We need to find ways that we show that we expect everybody. That everybody is expected to become a leader. Everybody and anyone in this organization is expected in different platforms. It's not reserved for a certain few or for certain types. Everybody is expected to reach their full potential. So when we say, where difference is expected, that's what I'm talking about. So think about how we make that happen. Secondly, celebrate it. When we say we're creating an organization where difference is celebrated, then we have to find ways to actually engage and around this. It means that we're an organization that create opportunities to highlight and appreciate the ways that we are different, creating opportunities to learn and expand and understand each other's differences as part of our day-to-day. And then lastly, when we say a place where difference is leveraged, we're talking about creating an organization where we use the advantages that our differences bring to actually make our organization better. We spend millions and millions, I'm going to talk dollars, millions and millions of dollars in our organizations, making sure that we have diversity. And then we do not leverage on it. We don't leverage on that diversity. We have all of these people with smart ideas, with different approaches, and we never use them. We never leverage them. And so if we can do those things, if we can make sure that as we think about difference, that it is expected, that it is celebrated, and that it is leveraged, our organizations are going to be successful into the future. And we're going to create resilient organizations that are going to be able to survive through disruption in the future. That's it.
I love that. So let's give some practical ideas for people. So if you're a leader of a team, when you have a meeting, and you might even be doing that planning now, for next year or early next year, you get the whole team together and you kind of want to get them going for the year. Two things that you can do in a meeting which do exactly what Buhle's just talked about, celebrating and leveraging the diversity. The first thing you can do is think through who are the people who normally talk and who are the people who normally be quiet. Now, forget any categories of diversity here, because this is irrelevant of diversity. This is probably more a personality profile than anything else. But why don't you as a team leader deliberately structure the the conversation to make sure that people who normally talk are quietened, and people who normally are quiet are given a platform. And that can simply be by deliberately telling, 3, 4, 5 people to say, I don't want you to contribute. You can maybe tell them beforehand and give them a heads up, and then deliberately calling out people in the meeting and saying, what do you think?
Yes.
For some of those people who might be shy, for some of those people who it's a personality profile, again, you might want to warn them in advance. Say, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I would just love to hear your voice. And so literally down to who we hear in our meetings and who gets space in our meetings might be a way for you to expect, celebrate, and leverage
Absolutely.
the diversity.
There's a question there from Rosalie that I think we probably could end on. And she talks about any tips on how to be authentic about this without being overly fearful of offending people. And she talks about recently being made aware of the he, she, and non-binary exclusions from these pronouns and rethinking how we communicate verbally and in writing. I think it is important that we recognize that this is an ongoing learning process. As a man, I have to understand that in most of these situations, if I don't think about my biases, if I don't think about my implicit and unconscious bias, they will show up when I least expect them. So now I have to consciously think about some of my biases when I enter into a room. I have to think about some of the privileges that I get just by being a man and about being a man of a certain education. And so it means that I have to constantly, as a leader, Rosalie, or anybody on this call, you have to constantly be improving yourself, be educating yourself. And I thank you for raising that question. And don't be fearful around making mistakes. We are going to make mistakes. The key thing is that if we're authentic about them, and if we engage around them, and we talk to people, let's not, sort of like treat this with kid gloves. It's a messy issue. It's a messy topic. But what will get us far is to be authentic with ourselves and be authentic when we lead and when we engage with others. People will see your heart. People will see that you're really serious about this, that you are trying and that you are making attempts. And so keep doing that. Keep educating yourself. Keep growing in this area. I wish we had more time, but that's
Can I just add 2 things quickly to that? I know we've only got 2 or 3 minutes left, but I'd add 2 things to that, and I think these are important. The first is to just emphasize what you've just said there, Buhle, that if we switch to questions rather than statements, that always diffuses potential engagement. So take the example of pronouns. Does somebody want to be called he or she or they? Well, why don't you just ask? So instead of trying to guess, instead of being scared, there's nobody that I've ever met or know who, if I ask them, what is the correct pronoun? Or how should I address you? And if you ask that question, not in an how should I address you kind of way, but if it's just a genuine question, I want to be the most respectful I can be to you. How do I address you? You're going to find the person saying, thank you for asking. I'd prefer they. And then you go, boom, thank you. Now we can move on. So asking questions is a way to do it. The second part, though, is to know which questions to ask. And here, I think you simply need to have a list in your head of all the privileges you have. Now, the privileges, we could phrase that a different way. All the power advantages you have. And so you've got to go through a list of all the possible categories of diversity. The obvious ones are there. So gender, race, culture, in certain countries, religion. Then you might have age. Then you might have education and experience. You might have position in your business. And so the list can go on. It even gets down to height. Do you know that there's never been an American president who's been less than 6'1" in height? Because tall white men, their height brings a privilege with it as well. I'm taller than that, and I have to bear in mind that when I walk into a room, my physical presence is a power structure. It might be better for me to sit down and to reduce that height balance. So what am I saying? You've got this list in your head. Instead of freaking out about the list, you simply work out, as I walk into this room, as I walk into this next meeting, in each of these categories, where do I have privilege? So where is the power with me? Is my race a power dynamic in this meeting? Is my gender a power dynamic in this meeting? And if it is, you make this choice. But our suggestion to you is you come with questions. The more power dynamics you have, if you want to diffuse that situation, and to bring and to get the benefit of diversity, the more you have to shift towards questions rather than statements. Simon Sinek has a great video in which he said, great leaders are the last to speak. And what he means by that is you let other people speak first, and don't impose your power relationships on that. Now, some people struggle with that. Some people find that very difficult to do, and it's not appropriate for every situation. If the house is burning down and you are the chief fireman or firewoman, as it happens, if you're the chief fire person, you arrive at the house. We don't have to have a diversity conversation and a meeting to work out where the power dynamics lie and bring everybody involved. This is a crisis situation that needs an intervention, and you've got the power, so use it. So we're not saying you do this in every meeting ever and in every aspect of your life ever, but where you want to get the value of difference, you've got to change those power balances and imbalances, and that's how you do it. So great question, Rosalie, and we've taken a while to answer it, but I think it was worth it.
It definitely is. And so for all of those who are joining us today, and I guess maybe the challenge that we live with you is what Graeme just shared around what questions should you be asking? What questions should you be asking of yourself? What questions should you be asking about the type of leadership or leadership style that you employ as you engage with difference? And as you engage with difference, it can be very, very easy to fall. I think, Rosalie, you touched on that, fearful of offending people, or you can go to the other side where you completely ignore difference, where you just say, yeah, we just treat everybody the same here. Why should we talk about difference, and why should we be thinking about difference and all of that stuff? If they're in this organization, they must just toe the line or ship out. And I've met leaders who actually think like that, who don't only think like that, who say such things, and then they fail to realize that as people, we have to work within the structures that we find ourselves in. And these structures, if we are not careful, they benefit others and they disadvantage others. And so then the question of equity always has to be there. Equity is more about what kind of framework we have in place. And I think we've come a long way on this front, but there's still some things to be done there. And so 2020 has brought a lot of questions around the issue of diversity, has brought a lot of questions for us as individuals. How do we engage around this topic? It's so fraught. Families are not talking to each other because of the election that just took place. There's division around what's trending on social media about the hashtag Black Lives Matter. There has been, this year in 2020, there's been so much that has made this topic a very, very difficult one to engage around. And I think that the most important thing that to remember as we engage with one another is that we are all different. We all bring different perspective, different ideas, and different ways of doing things. And so if we allow ourselves to just create a space where difference is accepted, where difference is celebrated and leveraged, I think we will go a much longer way.
Buhle, you and I can talk about this for hours and days. We often do. But that's our time now. We've actually gone over what we wanted to. I know both you and I are rushing out to other events as it happens. So anybody who would like to have more of a conversation, want to get more insights, and even get Buhle and the Tomorrow Today team to help you and your team to actually get the most out of the differences in your team, BuhleDlamini.com. Buhle, why don't you just pop that into the chat box for those of us who are live, because they can't see what I'm going to put.
Sure.
Here. And yes. Your name is not necessarily the easiest to spell when people are just hearing it. So if you are live, look in the chat box in a second, BuhleDlamini.com. You'll get hold of Buhle and you'll be able to see some of the resources he's got available and also some of the ways that he can assist you and your team. That's it from me for 2020 and these webinars. I know that lots of you have joined me for almost all of them. All of the archives are available, including this one, to go back, look again, share with your team, and set yourselves up for success in 2021. Buhle, I'm going to leave the last word with you, and then we're going to say goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And just remember what we said today, that we've got to, expect, we've got to celebrate, and we've got to leverage difference that we have in our organizations if we're going to succeed. It's going to be a great year. I'm not promising anything. I'm not saying that everything is going to go away that's troubled us this year, but I really believe that we've got to have that positive outlook and that we've got to be the ones that bring about the change that we need in our organization. So go out and make great things happen. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.